One, we are live. Hello, everyone. Namaste. A very warm good evening to all. Today, it's a very special day for the history enthusiasts. We have completed 6 years together, and we are very thankful to all the audience for supporting us through our journey. And we are aiming to do more work towards history, archaeology, and related subjects. To celebrate our birth anniversary, today we have a very special guest with us, Professor Dr. Kurush Dalal sir, and of course he's a very famous historian. He has also interviewed in Epic Channel and many more uh, YouTube and documentaries. So it was our privilege to have sir with us. I take this opportunity to warmly welcome Dr. Dalal to the platform of the history enthusiast. Thank you so much, sir, for providing us your precious time. Uh, I also welcome our honorary president, Dr. Nandan Shastri ji, who has guided us throughout this journey, and it continues. And founder, president of the history enthusiast, Miss Manali Momaya, also has given her time during her hectic schedule and her commitment for the development of the history enthusiast. Thank you so much for that. I also welcome all the audience, core committee members, advisory members to this session. Now I request Ms. Manali Momaya to introduce our today's resource person. Over to you, Manali.
Thank you very much, Nidhi, for the warm welcome. And yes, indeed, today is a very particularly special occasion for all of us at the History Enthusiasts, the whole family, as we celebrate the 6th anniversary of THE, as we call it now. What began as a small initiative driven by our curiosity and passion that learning shouldn't stop during lockdown, it has grown into a very vibrant platform. I think that it is a very vibrant platform personally. It has opened up dialogue, exploration, interdisciplinary engagement. We have tried to do that, and it is only fitting that we mark this milestone with a brand new lecture series. And it came to me that we are discussing so many different dimensions of history. Let us call this Āyām-e-Itihās, dimensions of history, exploring the many pasts. So the very title reminds us that history is it is never singular, never fixed or complete. There are always newer questions, unexplored perspectives, forgotten narratives, and fresh discoveries waiting beneath the surface. We have to just keep looking. And to inaugurate this series, we have with us someone who embodies that spirit of inquiry, Dr. Kurush Dalal, an archaeologist, historian, researcher, educator, and public intellectual. Dr. Dalal's work spans an extraordinary range of interests, from Iron Age archaeology and Indo-Roman trade networks to memorial stones, urban archaeology, food history, and culinary anthropology. Something I'm personally very, very interested in as a foodie and also someone who loves to cook. So it is very privileged. We are very privileged to have you with us, sir. His excavations at sites such as Sanjan, Chandor, and Mandad have significantly shaped our understanding of the western coast of India and opened up entirely new historical conversations. Equally remarkable is his ability to bring archaeology into public discourse with clarity, wit, and accessibility, reminding us that history is not buried in the past, but very much alive in the world that we inhabit today. So perhaps there could be no better person to deliver this lecture today. As we speak of many dimensions of history, the title of today's lecture, very, very intriguing for me, is there more new history to be studied? So with this, it is my privilege to once again welcome Dr. Dalal, and sir, I invite you to deliver the inaugural lecture of Āyām-e-Itihās. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Manali ji. Very kind of you. Shastri ji, an honor to be presenting this with you and, of course, Nidhi and all of her core group of people over here. Very, very grateful, very honored. And just thank you very much for having me here. delivering this on this very, very auspicious sixth birth anniversary. So I wish you 60 more at least, and I'm sure that you all will take this, you know, further and further as things move, as you all grow. I'm sure that the group will also grow, and young people coming in will add a lot of uh, new power to the dynamics that exist in a group like this. There are very good sharings in the group. I wish there are more discussions. And like I said, I hope to see this group really, really grow now. That said, today's topic, is there any more history to do? So that was very purposefully a very provoking topic, a bit of clickbait, if you'd like to call it that. Uh, what often happens today is you have people tell you, "Arey, sab kuch to ho gaya. We have recorded everything." Now, today, everything is recorded in great detail. So many people have worked on the history. Why do we need to study history anymore? Whatever we need to study is already done. There is no scope for historians. So I regularly come across this and it irritates the hell out of me. I'm not a very politically correct person. I normally don't care very much for politics in academia, though it is part and parcel of our lives and therefore we can't do anything about it. But that said, uh, why are we looking at the mental, moral, and social sciences as the art stream is actually defined as something where everything is done? There is nothing new to be done. We are only studying old tomes written 200 years ago till 50 years ago, and everything that has to be said has been said. And therefore, now if you study history, you can only become a school teacher or at best college teacher. Where is the scope to do research, the scope to find new things, so on and so forth? Again, like I said, I come across this quite often from students, and it irritates me enormously. And I was so grateful to be given a chance to talk about this. So there is no dearth of history today. Every single generation can re-look at history from a fresh perspective. Let's just start with that. We know that we are biased when we study history. Everybody will tell you when you start seriously studying history that the thing to do is to be as unbiased as possible. Not to be unbiased. You cannot be completely unbiased. It is impossible for a historian to be completely unbiased unless somebody from India is writing about, I don't know, the history of the Galapagos Islands or something like that. Okay, it is not really possible to be unbiased even then, I think. Your biases are built into you. They are part of your upbringing. They are part of your education. They are part of your early academia. And they are part and parcel of your politics. They're part and parcel of your geography. Very often, language plays a huge role. Whether you're from the first world or the third world, that plays a huge role. So there are so many different things that bring in bias. As a historian, our job is to, number one, identify our biases and then try and see where our biases are creeping into our work and remove them, curb them, put a very tight lagam on them at all points. So this is something that we need to look at amongst all historians. We need to stop writing pseudo history. Pseudo history is the Academy of Facebook and University of WhatsApp. So groups like this group go a long way towards dispelling rumors and rubbish that the internet is full of. One of our problems as historians is over the years we have made history very, very stringently dry, incredibly factful, as we call it. What we have forgotten is that the people who are out there, who are our target audience, are not necessarily hardcore academic historians. For them, we need to start writing a history which can be told to children, told to young adults, told to teens, and then so on and so forth. So, history number one now needs to be condensed. and history needs to be told in a manner which is engaging. I'll give you a simple example. When I was studying history, one of the very, very common things was the 1757 event at Palashi, the famous so called Battle of Plassey. And I had a brilliant history teacher. And she looked at us, this was in college, and said, why did we lose India to the British? So, everybody put up their hands and said all kinds of things. These are the usual answers. We were not joined together. The British were technologically more advanced, so on and so forth. Now, she said, what about that one object or one moment when we lost India to the British? When and why and what was it that made us lose? And we're all like, what was it that made us lose? She said, well, we lost India to the British because we didn't have a tarpaulin when we needed a tarpaulin. And the entire class looked at her like she was crazy and said, tarpaulin? What does a tarpaulin have to do with history? And she went on to tell us about how, after the Black Hole of Calcutta, which was a heavily hyped up event, Clive, who was then sitting at that time in Madras and twiddling his thumbs, brought his crack trained regiment to teach Siraj a lesson. They met on the battlefield of Palashi, which the British, of course, corrupted and called Plassey. They dragged the tiny 4-pounder cannon with them all the way from Madras. Facing them on the other side of the battlefield was a huge number of soldiers armed to the teeth and bristling with cannons of all kinds of calibers. The next day, it was very obvious that Clive and his men were all going to be turned into cannon fodder. Clive's team had been taught in a perfect British manner to set up camp, to stack their arms, to line up their cannon in an artillery park every evening, and to cover the gunpowder for the cannons with a large tarpaulin, which they had lugged all the way from Madras. The regiment had been grumbling all the way about having to carry this god-forsaken tarpaulin and put it on the gunpowder every night. Guess what happened that night? While Siraj and his people were all eating biryani and drinking ruh afza, whatever was going on in those days, and Clive and his people were probably eating incredibly boring food, which the British Army, well, the East India Company Army was provided with, it rained. There was unseasonal winter rain, a big, fat cloudburst of rain. The next morning, when battle was joined, not a single one of Siraj's guns could fire because his gunpowder was wet. The only guns on the field were the guns that Clive had brought with him. Instead of being a rout of the East India Company's army, it was a massacre of Siraj's troops. Yes, there was betrayal, there was this, there was that, there were various other things that happened. But the fact that the only cannon firing that day were Clive's cannons, the fact that Siraj did not have a tarpaulin when he needed a tarpaulin, was why ultimately India was lost to the British. I remember being absolutely blown away, absolutely stunned. I was like, I mean, we lost the whole of the subcontinent because of not having a tarpaulin in the right place at the right time. I mean, the ignominy of it was enormous. I have never forgotten the story. Subsequently, as I went through history and I studied more history, I realized that the story was way more complicated than this. But for a young history student, the story that we lost India because of a tarpaulin was something that has stayed with me forever and ever. More stories like this need to be told. More stories need to be told, which students will not forget, which will enrapture students, which will stay in their minds. And I will never forget the date of 1757, thanks to that one classroom lecture. So, getting back to what I'm saying, we need to rewrite history in a manner that is more fun. Now, I know as serious historians and serious academics, we don't do fun, right? Wrong. We need to start doing fun. If we want to bring more and more people to archaeology, it can't just be who killed whom, when, where, and why. There has to be a lot more than this. So we have to become storytellers. Remember his story, that part? So we need to be storytellers. And that is something that all of us historians need to learn. And we need to rewrite and take this massive new direction where history is approachable by the common man at multiple levels. Yes, we must have history for the academics. We must have history for the sake of history. We must have a very factual history. But it can't just be a dry political history or at the most an economic history. It has to be much more than this. Starting from the beginning of the 20th century, the Annals School already taught us the concept of total history. We realize what Barbara and Brock were talking about and how much more sensible it was than the pre existing hard history that existed, or factual history as they like to call it. We've realized how that has changed the way we look at everything. The Annals School has resulted in a across the board change in what you can study in history. And sadly for us, once the topics were demarcated, we stopped adding more topics to the pool. When I started studying culinary anthropology, I wanted to study the archaeology and the history of food in India. And I realized that the history of food in India had less than half a dozen historians. Yes. In fact, I personally think there are only three great Indian historians of food, and I'm not one of them. Okay. Dr. Musina Mukadam, Dr. Pushpesh Pant, who's basically a professor of civics, by the way. And of all the people whom I love so much, Vikram Doctor, who's probably a commodities historian and a storyteller par excellence, which is why the history that he tells us about our food is stuff that stays back in your mind. So, food history considered very ephemeral and considered, "Cheh, why do we need to study this?" Now, remember, you have to eat to live. If you don't eat, you can't fight any wars, you can't write any records, you can't have princes and kings and queens and warriors. You can't have farmers and all of that if you do not eat. So, eating is a very agrarian activity. And this is something that is more often than not completely forgotten by history. And I honestly think that if more of us started studying different aspects of the history of food, especially in India, where there has been such a blight, where people like Dr. Mukadam have been struggling in this desert alone with a handful of students and friends and well wishers. We need so much more of this than anything else. So, this is just one specific moment. There is work done and forgotten on the history of textiles in India. What about leather working? All of us use shoes, we use belts, we use bags. How many historians do we know who have worked on the history of leather working in India, the leather working castes and communities of India, the animals from whom we get our leather? When have we written all these histories? And why have we not written these histories? Or just because one person has written it, is it considered final? Is it considered done? There is no new data after that. Can the data of an entire subcontinent across thousands of years actually be studied by a single individual completely without leaving any scope for more study? Most people who work on pioneering work like this only open the door to a room with to a house with hundreds of rooms and thousands of windows. So just because somebody has worked on Indian textiles doesn't mean there is nothing to do. What about hairstyles in India? What about jewelry in India? How many historians can we have? I had a young student 25 years ago or thereabouts who wrote a brilliant thesis, a bachelor's thesis, 300 pages, and which blew my mind because what she brought to the table was that in Rajasthan, her family was a family of silversmiths. Silver jewelry is caste specific. Every single caste has specific jewelry that they wear. And I remember thinking that this is something that could be taken up by historians of jewelry and approached through archaeology and through history and through painting and through sculpture and through text and brought together in such a fabulous manner. And yet, there are probably not even half a dozen books that I have seen on this subject after that. The fact that the Nauwari sari of the Maharashtrian women, its drapery was actually specific to caste. You could identify the caste of a woman by the way in which she draped her 9-yard sari. Today, there are probably just two ways of wearing it. So, I've been lucky enough to see some of these things, to realize some of these things, to understand that archaeology and history are very often two horses pulling the same carriage. That whereas history can tell you about the past, it can only give you sometimes a limited view of the past because ultimately it is left to the written word to define history. History and archaeology together in a holistic manner, in a comprehensive manner, can completely change the writing and the telling of history. Bring in anthropology and sociology into it, bring in geography into it, and hallelujah, we are completely changing the world as we understand it. All of this is part of history. The cultural geography of India is part of history. And how many books do we have on it? So these are directions in studying history that I honestly think we need to look at, and we need to keep decentralizing the narrative. Too many of our narratives are centralized. Sadly, in India, caste based centralization is huge. We don't talk about conquests and heroes and kings from the point of view of the farmer. We don't look at the history of these people when we look at the history of kingdoms. And most of the time, the history of the lesser castes, to be very politically correct, the Dalits, is something that is relegated to Dalit historians. Why? Why is a historian not historian enough to do all of this and any of this? Where are the Adivasi historians? Where are the Adivasi historians working on the oral histories and oral traditions of the Adivasi communities of India? Remember, at one time we were all tribals. Where are those historians? Why is oral tradition not being taken very, very seriously? How many of India's historians, trained historians, are actively working in the Northeast, in the Himalayan foothills, in the forests of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh to bring together these oral histories and traditions of the tribals? Or is it just too much hard work? Who's going to go there and do all that work, right? I just want to sit in front of a comfortable computer and that's it. And then you will not learn anything because you will only be learning that which has already been studied before. There is a world of new archaeology, new history, and new anthropology to do out there. You need to talk about the narratives of the marginalized voices. You need to talk about queer history, for example. Today we are talking about the repealing of 377. We are talking about the LGBTQIA plus movements. We are looking at people reaffirming themselves in various different ways. Uh, we are looking at gender as an incredibly fluid thing. How many gender based historians do we have in India? Do we have enough? Do we have enough LGBTQIA plus historians in India looking at this history? Or must it be left only to the members of those communities to study the history? Historians can opt out of this one. The huge help of computational tools, memory studies, as we call them now, not just oral studies, is such a vast place for the historian to bring in new perspectives. The field is very sharply twisting, turning, and throwing itself away headlong, not just shifting from traditional elite focused nationalistic narratives towards a global, transnational, and experiential history. We are talking about the experiences of a peoples. This is hugely important because the same thing can be experienced differently by different peoples. The way a mother sees something, the way a child sees something, the way a monk sees something, and the way a warrior sees something, and it might be the same thing. I mean, perhaps one of the great literary geniuses, the book Rashomon Gate, tells us about how everybody has seen the same event differently, and yet nobody has understood why it happened till the ghost of the dead woman speaks up herself. So there are so many possible narratives. What are we doing about them? Why are we not exploring these different narratives? Digital history. How much of the history of computational studies is being done? Do we know more than just Charles Babbage built the first computer? Do we know how computers were built and what they went through? How many of y'all today have used a DOS prompt? How many of y'all today know a time before a mouse existed for a computer? I mean, my generation saw that happen. I could have never dreamed of having a computer at home because when I was a kid, computers cost 2 and 3 lakh rupees. And I'm talking about when I was a teenager. I'd never dreamt of a mobile phone either. And today, my mobile phone has more computational power than any of these devices that I used growing up. The XT, the AT, a mainframe, a computer in your house which did not have a hard disk, where you had to boot everything with a floppy drive, every program, and then run it. All of that has changed. Do we know its history? Have we put down its history? How many people have talked about the computational history of India? Does it even exist? This is the question I'm throwing out there to all of you all who are listening to me. Does it even exist? Is there a computational history of India? No, not that I know of, but I'm willing to be wrong. How many times are we talking about the environment today? How many times are we talking about how terribly badly of the environment is, how it is suffering, how through archaeology and history and historical records we can see how we have degraded the environment again and again and again. We know for a matter of fact from the 14th and 15th century chronicles in history that Marathwada was a land of swamps, and it was very, very difficult for armies, Sultanate armies, to move across Marathwada till the dry season. Marathwada has turned into a dust bowl. It almost continuously suffers from drought. This is environmental degradation. History has the evidence for this. But how many people are writing this environmental history? How many people are talking about the forest cover and the rate at which we have stripped it over the last 1,000 years? Enough records exist for us to start putting this together. Does anybody talk about this environmental history? Do we talk about the history of what mining has done to the landscape? Do we talk about the history of climate? Do we talk about the history of temperature variations in this country just thanks to roads being built and deforestation taking place side by side? We know that under the British, the mountains of the Sahyadris were covered in dense forests, that Indians were not allowed to cut trees. And when we became our own rulers, should I say, with gay abandon, we stripped the Sahyadris of their trees because they were our trees and we could cut them if we wanted to, right? Not realizing the damage that we did. The British didn't let us cut them because the British wanted the wood. We took the wood without considering what the future was all about. The Savitri River, which was a massive river flowing past Mahad, next to the capital of Shivaji Maharaj, was a port, an inland port We have historical records. Sart Khandichi boat, okay? So a boat of massive tonnage, 60 khans, could come all the way to Mahad and dock at Mahad. Today, it's difficult to get even a rowboat or a motorboat to Mahad because the Savitri is densely silted up due to the silt that came off these mountains. How have we changed the geography? What is the history of our geography? Or should that be left just to geographers, not to historians? How will geographers know what historical tools to use when they want to talk about this? Only historians will know, right? Because only historians are rigorously trained in historical technique and method. So instead of saying every single discipline should write its own history, and they should, and also write their own historiography, what are historians doing? We need to decenter, we need to look at global perspectives, we need to look at environmental and scientific histories, and we need to look at what we are calling history from below, from the common man's perception. We have to stop seeing history from the perception of the rulers, but we need to look at it from the perception of the ruled, and the ruled consist of many, many, many different varieties of peoples, just male, female, and all of the other genders that we're talking about today. And all of these peoples, okay, all of these peoples need to have their voices heard and recorded. And this is the history that we need to start working on before we lose it. The partition archives have realized that they've lost so much data on the partition because they started so late, because they thought it was a done deal. But it isn't. Archaeological excavations regularly reveal new data of ceramics, of numismatics, of epigraphy. How often do historians update historical texts based on this data? Why do archaeologists live in one ivory tower and historians live in another? Isn't it time that we started talking to each other? Isn't it time that, as I said, anthropologists, archaeologists, and historians, and even sociologists need to start coming together to write more comprehensive histories, along with technocrats, scientists, geographers, and all manner of people from all walks of life? So, this is the main crux of the history that we need to do now. We need to stop doing just traditional history. I'm not saying don't do it. If there is data to do traditional hardcore history, please do so. But when there isn't, okay, start looking at all the other sides. History is not a flat two-dimensional plane. Start looking at the source analysis very, very carefully. Where is your data coming from? Is it only coming from the traditional sources? The so-called official texts? Are you looking at popular print? Are you looking at digital archives? Are you looking at cultural artifacts? What about interdisciplinary integration, which is what I was talking about? Utilizing techniques from social sciences, geography, literary theory, and seeing how we can relook at the past by using other people's methodologies. And ultimately, a very active learning and pedagogy is very, very important. We need to incorporate digital, visual, experiential learning. We need to take people to history. We need to take people to historical sites, monuments, plazas, cities. We need our people to interact with our history. We have foreigners coming to India to write India's history. And we have thousands upon thousands of foreigners coming to witness the marvels of India's history. Historians should be at the forefront of tourism. They should be leading the charge, along, of course, as I said, with archaeologists, anthropologists, etc. But historians should be the custodians of sharing heritage, of training people in tourism studies, of showing them what we can do with the history that we have, and in telling these stories to the tourists that come. I still remember I was working on a project at the Qutub Minar, and it was part of the Adopt a Monument Heritage scheme that had come up, but sadly didn't amount to much. And I was sitting in the shadow of the iron pillar, and there was a badge carrying tourist guide with a large bunch of people who definitely come from a small town somewhere in northern Uttar Pradesh from the accent and the speech. And he told them to look at this amazing iron pillar and to look at the inscription on it, which was written in the Chinese script. Chini lipi mein likha hua lake. And I was shocked. I was aghast. And everybody was looking at us. Looks like Chinese. It was a beautiful early Gupta Brahmi inscription, right? The inscription of Chandragupta II. And I was shocked that a card carrying tourist guide was saying something ridiculous like this because he felt that the history that existed was too boring. He needed people from China to come down and write on an iron pillar in India for it to be interesting enough for the public. This sadly is what has happened because us historians have not reclaimed this space. We need to claim and reclaim the tourist space and the tourism space. And we need to make sure that we teach a factual history, not a history made up of divisions, not a history made up of us versus them, but an inclusive history, a history of all Indians for India, and not one group versus the other. So, with that, I'm going to stop saying all the things that I've been saying, and I'm going to open the floor to questions if Nidhi allows it, comments, general observations. If you want to throw brickbats at me, I'm good with that also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was wonderful lecture and very enlightening also. And our youngsters who are watching it will surely get a clear path to research on for the topics. Thank you so much, sir. So, with your permission, can we take some questions?
Please, please, that's the most important part of it. Questions, comments, compliments if you want to, brickbats if you don't. Everything is fair game.
Manali, do you want to read it out yourself or should I take it?
Yes, indeed. I would like to ask a couple of questions, but before that, so thank you very much for such a very intriguing lecture and for highlighting the hazards of a historian becoming close-minded and not taking into account all the other evidences that other disciplines of knowledge provide us with. So thank you very much. I have, because of a recent project that I'm working on, I realize that how limited our understanding of history has been because we do not take into consideration geographical evidences or we think that sociology or anthropology is not for us or that we think that science is not under the realm of history or whatever. So that has been my very recent experience, and it has always pained me to see that many people think that history is a pure separate subject and it has to be kept that way. Thank you very much, sir, for that. I have a couple of questions. One of the question Nidhi had put it on the screen just now. So, do you think that social media and digital platforms are helping in democratizing history, or are they oversimplifying it?
So I think they are democratizing history, they are simplifying history, not necessarily oversimplifying. They are also demonizing history, which is something that we need to look at as historians. This is where we need to protect history. We need to stop people who take history, who twist history, okay, to their own narratives, and who exclude people from the narratives of history. So yes, it is definitely making, it's decentralizing history. It's allowing everybody to write about history. See, social media means anybody can say anything that they want to say about anybody. Uh, and yes, it's a democracy so far. And well, therefore they should be allowed to say what they want to say. But We don't have anybody and everybody on social media telling us how rocket ships should be built, or how we should build our latest Agni 7 or 8 or whatever missiles. We don't have that, do we? Why? Because you say, no, that's for scientists. We don't have them telling us how we should do genetic studies, do we? But we have them telling us how we should do history. So history is a soft target, Manali. And because history is for all, right? So yes, we need to be guardians of history, not closed guardians of history, open guardians of history, open to change, open to discussion. But we need to safeguard history from being violated.
Thank you very much, sir, for highlighting our roles as custodians of history and how it is our responsibility as the custodians to give the real history to the people and also to make sure that it is not violated. Thank you for the answer, sir. I have another question in this regard. So, how do we, as students or teachers of history, deal with the false narratives that are floating around social media in the guise of real or unbiased history, as they call it now?
So this takes effort, Manali. This takes effort. And that is why most historians don't engage with this rubbish. Because it takes effort, you have to systematically listen to that rubbish first. Then you have to give out all those important points which have been missed. You have to give references for the same, and you have to provide an incredibly solid killer defense. Now, with the way teachers are burdened with exams and papers and corrections, and researchers are fighting deadlines all the time, most people just buckle under and say, Jane do yaar, they are idiots, let it be. But the let it be means that those false narratives then pick up speed. So we need organizations like this one that you all are part of. Okay, THE needs to start having a more active voice through maybe an Instagram channel. TikTok is gone, so not that. Definitely something on X, where every day or every week, it doesn't have to. See, nobody's getting paid to do this, right? This is all people love for their subject and their discipline, which is making this happen. So set small targets. You don't have to do 10 stories a day. You don't have to do 20 reels a week. If you do 2 reels a week, refuting things, if you do one story a day, or one story every 3 days also, to start off with, build up your momentum slowly and surely. Build up your momentum. That's what we need to do.
Thank you very much, sir. It is indeed a very good suggestion and something that is very near to our hearts. So we'll definitely take this up and we'll work in this direction. And hopefully, we will be able to do what I just have in mind. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So, Nidhi, will you read this
So we,
question from Nandan, sir?
yeah, sure. Uh, so Dr. Nandan Shastriji has asked a question. In Mountain View City, there is Computer History Museum. It has 19 galleries. Do you think Bangalore will be a very appropriate place if Computer History Museum is established in India?
Yes, very much. But I think, Shastriji, with due respect, I think smaller museums in more cities. Yes, a comprehensive museum in Science City in Bangalore, or in Science City in Salt Lake in Kolkata is a great idea. But we need multiple smaller museums. We need e-museums. Today, everybody is consuming data on the internet, on smartphones. We need e-museums. E-museums that can have curated data. Google is already working, Google Arts and Crafts is working on this, and lots of people are working on taking the museum online. And an online museum is also a very effective museum because you don't have to pay for space. You don't have to pay for jhadu, pocha, electricity, and all of those things, that a brick and mortar museum has. Yes, you still have to put in effort. You still have to safeguard it. It still costs money to host the URL and the data, etc. and to build the website. It's not going to be free, but tools are making things easier and easier. Today, AI is making it possible for you to build a website, a comprehensive website, sometimes in less than half an hour, which of course you need to populate properly. And that takes time. Call it galleries and open it up one at a time. Why not? Why are there no museums like this, sir? And I mean, if it's a computational museum and it's digital, what more honor can you do computational history than having a digital museum for it? That's just my take on it. Of course, it's a free world. People are fully entitled to their opinions as long as they're not hurting anybody with them.
Dr. Dalal, the first virtual museum in India has come up near Pune, and it is a Jain Heritage Museum.
Yes,
And in
yes,
the world, the first virtual museum came into existence in 1984 in Virginia, United States.
Jason,
So
Jason.
India is
You know, sir,
also trying.
now, sir, what is happening is the Punjab government has been building a lot of museums over the last 10, 15 years. Interestingly, I have come across museums where there is not a single artifact. The entire museum is only digital. I
Yes,
remember being quite shocked that you are building entire museums with just digital content, which has been fabricated. Yes, fabricated using historical data and all of that. I'm not denying any of that. But you are fabricating this, it is purely imaginary content, it is fully digital content, and you're calling it a museum. I had to question myself, sir, about what a museum is. So, yes, I mean, I might not agree with it, but others might feel it's right. So, again, as long as you're not hurting somebody and you're factually trying to be as correct as possible, to each their own.
Uh,
Thank you,
there
sir,
is
for that.
another question. So this will be the last question which we will be taking in this session. And the question is, what do you think future historians will find most difficult to understand about our own time, the current time?
Didi, you don't want me to go down that road. So, the first thing that future historians are going to ask my generation of historians, hopefully not yours, is why were historians quiet when history was being torn apart? Why did the historians not stand up for history? Where were we? Why were we not counted amongst those standing up against pseudo history? This is something that I tell everybody that I know, that we need to be very active in the digital space. Because if the digital space is where India is learning, remember anybody with a mobile phone today, a so-called smartphone, I mean, I don't know how smart they are. Sometimes I think they're too smart. Uh, Anywhere in this country with a decent network, not even a great network, can consume content. Content is being consumed and generated by lakhs and lakhs of Indians every single day. When you are permanently on the hunt for eyeballs, you will try to sensationalize your content. So, where are those guardians? Where are those warriors of history standing up and defending history? Today, we have a people on whom a genocide was perpetrated, perpetrating a genocide of their own, and India is silent. We were the biggest active supporters of the Palestinian cause, and today we are silent on what is happening in Palestine. Iran has been our traditional friend forever. If you remember Kautilya's Arthashastra, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And Iran has always been our friend because of that. And we abandoned Iran. And then we had to eat humble pie and buy oil from Iran. Uh, the politics of the world have become very, very complicated, and historical perspectives have been forgotten by people. We need to wake these people up, and we need to tell them that this cannot go on. This cannot. just cannot go on. We cannot keep our eyes closed like this. We cannot just casually float our way through life. Today, the world is integrated. Historians are the custodians of the past. We need to stand firm. Sorry if I sound like I'm doing prachar, as a couple of my friends tell me, but I feel very strongly about this.
No, sir, it was really a very prompt answer, according to me. Thanks a lot. So, due to network issue, because Manali is traveling, she has got disconnected. We have uh, successfully come to the end of this session with beautiful questions, answers, and of course, the lecture itself. So now I request our honorary president, Nandan Shastri ji, to propose vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Before Shastriji, if there are more questions, I'm very happy to take them. I'm very active on Instagram at the rate Kurush Dalal, or you
Yeah.
can put them on THE and tag
Yeah,
me, and I will try and answer everything. I'm not Maggie noodles; it will not be instant, but it will be done.
sure, sir.
Even on your email ID, or some from the audience can ask you questions.
Oh yes, sir.
Dr. Dalal, many thanks to you for such an enlightening lecture, and we will look forward to you again in future also for the history enthusiast group. And nice day. I thank Nidhi and Manali for planning and playing important role for executing today's event. And I thank also the audience. And question and answer session was also very interesting. Thanks to all. Namaste.
Thank you very, very much to THE and Shastriji and Nidhi and Manaliji and all of you all who are listening in and all of you all who will be listening in, I hope, to the recording. It was an honor to be called here, especially on an important day like this. And I am deeply grateful to THE for the same.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much, sir. So I request all the audience to stay tuned. We will be coming up with the next lectures, and the details will be shared uh, through Instagram and, of course, our WhatsApp group. Stay tuned. Namaste. We are ending our session here.